Welcome everyone to our leverage and real estate event for 2025. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We've got some great speakers joining us. Kevin Mercier, who's a very proficient mortgage professional in Greater Vancouver, as well as Steve Saretsky and Ryan O'Hearn, who are two reputable real estate professionals in Greater Vancouver. I've worked with all these guys before, and they're professionals, and I'm really lucky to have them on to share some of their insights. First off, interest rates. As we all know, COVID led to super low interest rates. Bank of Canada ultimately had to raise rates like crazy in order to get inflation under control. Since mid last year, rates have been coming down. We're seeing mortgage rates finally in a reasonable state. So for those of you going through renewal season, you're in a better spot than you would have been, say, a year and a half ago. And Kevin will get into more of those details. Now, Steve actually shared this graphic with me, which I thought was really interesting. So what this is showing you is the average sale price in Greater Vancouver compared to the gold. And what you can see is, although in dollar value terms, real estate in Greater Vancouver has done phenomenally well over the last couple of decades. If you compare it to gold, it actually hasn't done as well as we thought. And so really what this is telling us is that there's a lot of money getting printed, and the purchasing power of our dollars continues to become less and less. So even though we, particularly in Greater Vancouver, may feel rich because of the value of our properties has increased, the purchasing power of our dollars globally isn't quite what it used to be. And so I'm not an expert here, but I've just found this chart interesting, so I did want to just quickly run through it. There are still a few opportunities for financial success. It's not all doom and gloom. First up, there's the first home savings account here in Canada. Now, most of you on the call already have a primary residence and probably have a couple properties, so this isn't relevant to you. But for your family members that perhaps want to eventually get into the market, this is a pretty cool program. $8,000 per year can be contributed. It's tax deductible. It's a one-time use program. So once the buyers bought their first home, this account's not relevant anymore. If the money's not used for that property purchase, it can be rolled into the RRSP. So for anyone who doesn't own real estate, perhaps it's your kids or your nephews, recommend taking a look at this account and making sure that you use it. In addition, the property transfer tax exemption got increased recently. So there's a lot of incentive, I would say, for first-time buyers to get into the market, even if in BC, the rental market isn't as frothy as it used to be. Although I'm not a fan of clients taking on insane amounts of leverage, when people have their RSPs full, their TFSAs full, they've got their principal residence, leverage can make sense. And so I've shared this slide in the past, but I know we've got a few new people on the call. I call investing in global stocks as conservative leveraging. This is not borrowing a ton of money and throwing it into NVIDIA or throwing it into Netflix or Google. This is a globally diversified stock portfolio, not all S&P, ensuring that you can get an 8% rate of return in the long run and arbitrage that against the interest that you're paying, let's say 4%. Now, if that interest is tax deductible on a regular basis and you're in a top marginal tax bracket, it can be a very smart strategy. And Kevin will talk more about rental properties and how to do something similar, but I'll quickly share an example of how one of my clients did this over the last 5 years. So they bought an apartment in 2019. It was their principal residence. They lived in it for a few years, but in 2020, when the market tanked, they borrowed a couple $100,000 and they put it into the equity markets. So this was March of 2020. They then rode that out for a few years and ended up going on maternity leave. And so they only ended up working 6 months of the year in 2023, so their income was lower. They then sold off their investments, which at that point had grown to about $140,000. So they did have to pay tax on the capital gain, but because their marginal tax rate was lower in that year, it wasn't actually that bad. What that did is it put them in a really good spot for purchasing a detached property in 2024. And so now they're renting out the condo, and that's excellent because that mortgage is tax deductible against the rental income. And now they've got a detached property. So this is a way that you can kind of bridge getting from one property to the next if you want to own lots of property and still use the fact that cheaper money can help you make money longer term. So this is just a unique client example that I thought I would share. Not everyone's situation will be like this, but it's important to know how you can use leverage in your portfolio, not only in real estate. 3 rules of thumb: work with an advisor you trust, maintain your emergency savings, and pay yourself first. As clients who work with us and our firm know, we're never trying to sell anything. It's more about how do you plan effectively through the good and the bad times. Last year, when we did this event, I was talking about high interest savings accounts. This year, I'm talking about bonds. So if you've got money at the banks that's sitting in cash, GICs, or high interest savings, it's a great time to get out of that and likely into bonds. And why would you look at bonds? Well, they're more tax efficient rather than all your income coming in the form of interest income, which is 100% taxable. Some of it will come in the form of capital gains, which is tax preferential. And second, in the current interest rate climate, you're actually going to see better returns because some of those bonds are paying higher than what you're going to get from a GIC rate or a high interest savings account rate at your bank.
Okay, Vancouver housing update. Next slide here. Yeah, so this is obviously for those that are keeping track of what's happening in the mortgage market, looking for deals. Obviously, we have about 60% of the mortgages are coming for renewal in 2025 and 2026. So obviously, I bring this up because obviously we've got Kevin on the webinar here tonight, so he can kind of chat about what's happening in the mortgage market. But this is something to kind of keep track of. The Bank of Canada, they're cutting rates. People that are refining right now or coming up for renewal. So tons of mortgage activity that's happening there. Obviously on the fixed rate side, we're watching that Canada 5-year bond yield, particularly with all this trade war. You're seeing a lot of volatility there. So I think what's important here is just for anyone that's got a mortgage, coming up for renewal, or maybe they locked in a couple of years ago at higher rates. I think today is the time to be actively shopping, holding on to rate holds as well, and looking at an opportune time to lock in here. So that's number one. Next slide. So this kind of coincides with the 60% of mortgages being renewed over the next 2 years. Basically, what's happening is over the last 5 years, the market's been heavily driven by investors. And what's happened is basically, your variable rate mortgage has gone up exponentially, or maybe you came off a 1.5% mortgage rate and now you're renewing today at 4.5%. And so what's happening is a lot of these investors that bought these units went from being cash flow positive $200 a month to all of a sudden their mortgage rate has spiked. Now they're losing $600 a month, and they can't raise the rent because BC tenancy laws are very, very strict and they cap how much you can increase the rent. So what's happening is basically we have a lot of landlords that are caught in these negative cash flowing situations with really no exit other than continue to bleed every single month until things hopefully get better, which, and again, hope is not really a strategy. So what you're seeing now in the market is it took a couple years. In fact, it took about 3 years. We're now seeing condo inventory actually spiking to basically record highs, in markets like the Fraser Valley and the suburbs there, where I would argue there was a lot of speculation. We had the huge run up during the pandemic, and a lot of people that were building out their portfolios, adding investment units, over the last number of years that again are now looking to get out. So more investors leaving the market than entering the market, and that's adding to the condo supply, particularly in the suburbs. So again, this kind of coincides. We talked about the mortgages that are being renewed at higher rates. Inventory is now being added. In addition to that, we're seeing that rents have peaked and they're actually declining. In Vancouver, from the peak, call it 18 months ago, rents, if you're having a turnover rent today, let's say you rented out a unit at the peak of the market 18 months ago, that tenant has now left, there's a vacancy. You're typically seeing on average about a 10% decline in rents, anywhere from call it 5 to 10%. So again, if as a investor landlord, you're looking at a scenario where your mortgage rates have gone up, your rents have peaked and are now declining. And so there's a lot of people, again, that are just having to make difficult decisions saying, okay, am I really a long-term investor that is willing to stick this out for the next 5 to 10 years? Or do I think that there's very little upside here and it's just time to exit? So that's kind of what's happening in that space. And so again, investors, we look at what's happening in the new construction market. We talked about the supply on the resale market. That is strictly like, resale units that are on the MLS. if you look at what's happening in the new construction market, I would call this basically the shadow inventory, because new construction units typically are not listed on the MLS. And so if you look at the number of dwellings that are currently under construction that will be completing over the next, call it 12 to 24 months, you do have a record number of condo units that are under construction that will complete at a time when investor demand is obviously soft, immigration is pulling back, and rents have peaked. So the investors, again, when you're looking sort of at the near term outlook, it doesn't look so great. And then we look at new home sales. So at the peak of the sort of bull market in 2021, there was 19,000 condo units sold in 2021. For 2024, we're down to about 7,000 units. So a huge drop off. Again, not horribly dramatic in terms of when you kind of zoom out. You got places like Toronto where you've got 30-year lows in new condo sales. So Vancouver, obviously, holding in there, but overall quite weak. And this is, again, sort of the shadow inventory. So unsold inventory on developer balance sheets. What we can see here is these are all the units that are basically sitting at presentation centers. So it's developers that have buildings that have completed and they held back some inventory, and those obviously have not yet sold. So let's say the developer held back 20% of the building. They've got some inventory there. And this is also including developers that launched as pre-sales and are actively selling right now. Of course, trying to ramp up incentives and things to get people to sign on the dotted line. But as you can see, number of units that are under construction plus unsold inventory is basically at record highs. And so when you look at the dynamics and you say, well, why is developer inventory piling up? Again, it's because the investors, which account for, call it 65-70% of the pre-sale market, are just not very active today. And so what's happening is, you're seeing that weakness in that new construction market in particular. So when we talk about sort of the distress in the market, it's really actually predominantly in condos, and it's predominantly in new construction. That's where most of the pain is in the market. It's a much different market when you look at, say, an entry-level single-family house, an entry-level 3-bedroom townhouse. The end user market is actually holding up quite well. It's the real weakness is in the condo market, and in particular in the new construction market. Where are the flippers? So the BC government, in their infinite wisdom, after the market had peaked and rolled over, they brought in a flipping tax, because they said there's too many flippers in the market. But as we can see here, house flipping activity actually peaked in about 2006, 2007. And since then, it's really been, it's been a fraction of what it was. Even during the last boom during the pandemic, it was around 7 or 8% of total sales were people that bought and resold within a 2-year period. And now, of course, we've crashed to multi-decade lows. So there is no home flipping, and there's no home flipping because there's no price appreciation. So the market is taking care of itself. There you go. So BC kicks off with 2025 with new rules, including 20% flipping tax. As if flipping was ever the problem. People move when home prices go up. That's kind of the free market taking care of itself. And of course, today, as home prices are flat to declining.
Thanks, Steve. Tons of valuable insight there. And it's clear we're in a totally different market than we were a year ago. So hopefully this is relevant for everyone on the call. Like, if you're looking to buy or looking to move, this is the type of data you need to consider before you make these large investments. Next up, we've got Ryan O'Hearn. So Ryan, I actually know from the university days. He's a very successful real estate professional here in the Lower Mainland, and he's helped a number of our clients with their transactions over the years. He's got some really interesting stats to share today as it relates to multifamily developments.
There's definitely a lot of heavy news out there, and for good reason. But here's just some interesting stats as well, just to show a picture of what could be a bit of a buoyancy factor to kind of help with the market here. When we look at clear title equity, just the run up that we've had over the last 30 years here, there is a lot of clear title equity tied up in real estate in Vancouver. In December 2024, is estimated as about $434 billion of clear title equity in Metro Vancouver, predominantly mostly tied up with in the hands of baby boomers, actually, not surprisingly, which bought their homes over 30 years ago. Between ages 55 to 74, the baby boomers are sitting on $221 billion of equity. 75 plus age group, about 27%. We see 115 billion. The younger folk, unsurprisingly, are at 22% of clear title equity. But total, we do have 434 billion. And a lot of this is most likely with parents or grandparents selling. People do want to keep their kids close to home, ideally. And we can probably assume that a good chunk of this equity is being recycled back and put back into the market. So we do see this personally with a lot of clients of mine, especially younger clients. They are getting help from mom and dad. Bank of Mom and Dad is a classic example. And they are needing these down payments typically to get in because of just the affordability factor. So there is still a lot of clear title equity out there to be had. So I'm just an interesting stat here. We just pulled from the Rennie landscape. But Rennie is looking at the census data of clear title equity over the last 10 years. And they've estimated about 300 million is released on a monthly basis from the baby boomers and older age bracket category. So $397 million of equity being released, perhaps through estate sales, perhaps through downsizing, perhaps they sold and moved to Mexico and gave the money to their kids. But there are some examples here. We see that's not a small number. $397 million is a decent chunk of money. We can't assume all of that's being redeployed into the market, of course. But just to take an example of February 2025, a very slow month, albeit it wasn't a big month, but 397 million represents about 24% of that. So again, kind of cherry picking a little bit here, but there is a case probably to be had with some of that, a good chunk of that equity being put back into the hands of the kids to reinvest in the market. And that's typically how a lot of the new homeowners are able to stay in Vancouver and build their own homes of themselves. So where I'm going with this is that with affordability and with this theme, there are some interesting and creative solutions which are coming out of this. For example, here, a client of mine, they were looking for a townhouse in Burnaby. So we're looking at townhouses, looking at about $1.4 million for a 1,500 square foot townhouse. That's a 3-bedroom townhouse there. And you have a little section of land like this big attached to your townhouse for $1.4 million. Now, the other solution was parents were on a large lot with a huge lane at the back, an open backyard, and they got quoted for $800,000 to build a lane house. The exact same size, 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms as well. So when you look at this, I mean, you're kind of cheating a little bit with the lane house because the land is free. So Bank and Mom and Dad's basically say, hey, you can live on our land. But this does kind of look at introduce some interesting use cases where you may have a young couple that is looking to have kids soon. They want mom and dad close for caretaking. And, $800,000, that sounds, in terms of taking that on as a mortgage, a lot easier to do for people in their 20s or 30s, early 40s versus, over $1 million mortgage. So again, mom and dad were able to help by supplying the land for free, and they came in with the financing in terms of a mortgage. I know Kevin's a great guy to talk to about something like this. And they're building their lane house right now. And as long as, costs looking good, it's about $800,000 for that lane house. So kind of interesting stat there. So this house here in Burnaby, Government Road, great area of Burnaby here. We're just looking at 7 days on market. It's sold how much over asking price? We see over almost 80,000 over asking price, 129,000 over assessment value. And you might be wondering why this is so in February 2025 when the market is quite, slow. But when we look into it further here, this is because of the new regulations from Burnaby has put in for multi-unit, this SSMUH, small scale multi-unit housing. And this law is great because it has over 66 feet, so 75-foot frontage, which is great because you can actually subdivide that and build 4 units per lot. So that's 8 units total. And townhouses specifically, which townhouses are in great demand right now amongst millennials. They want their own doorway. Most millennials don't want to raise their kids in condos. So there's great demand for townhouses, and developers are jumping on these opportunities right now. If you have a larger lot, you could be actually in a great position to leverage this to sell to a developer or participate with a developer with timelines, which I'll talk about later. This is an example in Vancouver on 17th Avenue. So pretty standard, about I think 50 by 120-foot lot here. So you got the 50-foot frontage, which allows you to do but over 5 to 6 units on the 50-foot frontage. So this one they've opted for a 4-unit main building. So basically attached townhouses in the main building with a lane house at the back. Now, Vancouver, you do require a lane access at the back for multi-unit, where Burnaby, you do not need a lane access at the back. So Burnaby has been known to be a bit more flexible in terms of their multi-unit housing. Compared to Vancouver, they are definitely more rigid, but they do have some interesting solutions here. So we see the lane house at the back, 5 parking, which is great because every unit gets a parking, and you do have the laneway at the back. So you park at the back, you have 4 homes in the front there, and then they do have a PMT as well. You have to install that for over 3 units, I believe. You need to install the PMT for hydro reasons. But long story short, you know, this could be a great option to sell off for developer later, and it's very family-oriented housing. So this is a great solution and option for homeowners to potentially use this opportunity to sell out of the market. Again, just a bit of data here as we see in pertaining to the multi-unit housing. Over 50-foot frontage, you can actually even do 8 units for rental, which hasn't really been explored quite yet because it's just the numbers don't quite pencil out as well. But between 4 to 6 units, there are a lot of opportunities out there. But you do need at least 3,600 square feet as a lot. Otherwise, you won't really qualify under the new standards here. What makes an ideal lot? You might be wondering, kind of talked about a little bit already, but if you are on a lot that's 50 foot or more in Burnaby or Vancouver, you do have more flexible options. And especially if your home needs a lot of improvements, you don't really want to fix up and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on your home, and you kind of want an easy exit. This could be for you as well. 150, ideally you want a deeper lot. You don't want anything too shallow. So 115, kind of a standard size lot, nothing irregular. Lane access at back is a plus. Must for Burnaby, sorry, must in Vancouver, nice to have in Burnaby. Flat, corner lots are nice. And if you're flexible in your terms, so if you have a lot, there are kind of 3 options for you. You could sell on the MLS as a standard listing. If you are living in your home happily and you're like, I don't want to move in the next year, I want some time, you can actually participate with a developer where they could close in a year and you can make some extra money that way by just living in your house for an extra year, and you save the developer on interest rates. They don't need to pay interest for a year while you live in there, and they can develop right away after a year. So you can actually boost your sale value by working with a developer on timelines as well. It does have to be specific zoning as well. So if you do have any questions on this, we can definitely look into your specific home to see if it would qualify and if it is suitable for marketing to developers. And yeah, that's my spiel for the day.
Wow, lots of info there, Ryan, but super interesting. And this is obviously a topic that most, I'd say, homeowners in Vancouver haven't really thought about, but now's the time, right? Like these rules have changed in favor of multifamily. And why not work with a developer rather than just selling to another buyer who's potentially going to just do the exact same thing? So I think this makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing some of this insight and data so folks can consider it for their own situation. Kevin Mercier is a mortgage broker. He runs his own shop here in Greater Vancouver, and he does a great job. He's helped a number of my clients, and I think some of Ryan and Steve's as well. He's going to talk about some of the ways in which folks are getting creative using debt and share a little bit of stats as it relates to the debt market. So
I've been doing this job as a mortgage broker for 17 years. And it's funny, in the 17 years, we're almost full circle from what happened in 2008, where interest rates at that time were kind of, when I came into this industry, we were like, a normal fixed rate was probably 6.3%. And, we just kind of went through that period where we were kind of hitting those marks. And now we're dropping large again. And it's funny when you look at interest rates over a period of their ups and downs. Interest rates don't tend to have a soft landing. They tend to go up and then they crash hard down. And that's what we're experiencing right now. So what I'm doing with a lot of clients is that probably the lowest interest rate that I'm getting out of free from renewal is 4.69, and saving money by refinancing into a new mortgage, because it does make a ton of sense. And a lot of the penalties that are coming back right now are still in that 3-month interest period. Whereas when I did this back in 2008, they hit into the IRD penalty, which is a lot larger in most cases, quite quicker. So what we're seeing in the market right now is a lot of uncertainty. You're probably feeling it. I'm feeling it. But in that uncertainty, and you notice from the Bank of Canada announcement the other day, is that they're really concerned about that uncertainty because a lot of people aren't spending money, and we are probably heading into what's known as called a stagflation sort of economy where we're going to see unemployment go up, we're going to see inflation go up because of these tariffs being introduced, and we're going to try and spearhead the economy, and where we're going to do it from is by lowering rates. So economists are projecting right now with the implementation of these tariffs to continue, and I don't really see them backing down from it. Trump's, putting his foot in the sand pretty hard, and we're going to be seeing probably the expectation is a reduction of 0.25 for the next four announcement, which leads us up to September. So that's another like point from where we're currently at, which is 2.75 in the bank rate, and the bank prime rate is 4.95, which takes us down to 3.95 by September this year, if that stays true. I was looking at our presentation from last year, and it was funny because I expected to be at 3%, which I was pretty close to because we're at 2.75 right now with the Bank of Canada rate. So, the expectations right now for drop further is anywhere from 1 to 1.5% with these tariffs in place. And again, what Steve said earlier, there's a lot of renewals coming up in the next 2 years. There's 1.2 million mortgages up for renewal in 2025, and I'm looking at like, when's the next big renewal year going to be? And with everybody refinancing now to get out of those higher rates, it's only tagging on to what it's going to be. If people are going into a 5-year variable, which most are right now, 2030 is going to be the big one upcoming here. So yeah, so to kind of turn the key into why invest in real estate, and Steve and Ryan probably mentioned a little bit is if you have the ability, the best time to buy real estate is in an uncertain market because you've seen how many listings that are available, and that's where you're going to get the best opportunity to get a good deal on something right now because people are scared, right? So in the traditional scope of buying homes, the majority of people are scared. But if you're positioned right now where you have good equity in your home, which I'll take you through in a little bit, there's a great opportunity to leverage that equity in your home, which is doing nothing right now. I mean, it's just sitting there in your home. If you can leverage that to buy future property, I would say now is a very good time to do that, especially with rates coming down. Is we want to find opportunities where cash flow, is good, or even like we want almost to be even, where cash going into that property and cash coming out as revenue is even Steven, whereas over the duration of owning that property is where you're going to see that big increase. So you can see on the chart here, the growth over 5 years is 33% increase in our area, whereas the year-over-year growth is -4. So, at the end of the day, it's the law of averages, right? And the longer term real estate is extremely good investment in Vancouver. I was just at a session the other day with Ozzie Jurek, who's a very prevalent real estate investor, and he's by far the biggest bullish on real estate investment in the Vancouver area. So, and as you can see, the vacancy rate, I think last year I had it at 1.3%, so it's still quite low at 1.6. But it was good to see kind of where rent is at as well in the condo market. It's still strong, but yeah, it has dipped from obviously the highs there. So, with real estate, some of the benefits, obviously tax benefits, you're leveraging growth on an initial investment, great retirement strategy. There's a lot you can do because you're building equity and you're building net worth. So what I'm just going to take you through quickly here is just kind of an example of how you leverage that equity. So if you're buying a home, and this is kind of how I built my portfolio back in the day, is that when I bought my first property, I bought that property and it was in Port Moody, and then I ended up renting out that property and getting into the next property. So I kind of charted out how I experienced it. So, if I live in that property, for say 5 years, then I have enough equity based off of, you see that 33% increase over 5 years. I didn't have that enough equity because I've been paying down my mortgage and increasing my value, which is allowing me to refinance my property up to 80% of its value. So I take that out and I pay off the mortgage owing on it. And what I have left over is, say, in 5 years, I have 215,000 to put towards my next property. As you can see here, I take out that 215. I go out to the marketplace. I see a value of 1.075. I now have a mortgage of 860. My monthly mortgage payment is approximately 44.36, and I'm renting it for, say, $5,000 per month. That nets me 564. So each scenario is going to be different. Actually, if you reach out to me, I have a good list of where the good cash flow opportunities are in the Lower Mainland. So please reach out to me for that. And then obviously your old home, the equity that's in there, what the value is. Obviously, you've increased your mortgage, so your mortgage payment on that one, say 47.19, and then what you have there is that you've got your mortgage payment at 47.19, and then you're reducing that actual mortgage payment to 564. And when I did this back in the day, I actually got to the opportunity when I got to my third home that I wasn't paying anything from my principal residence. I wasn't paying a cent. Everything was being paid for from the rental properties that I had and owned because I had good cash flow at that period of time. So if you set it up on the right process, it can be very rewarding for you. You can see like how your net worth then grows year over year between your home that you initially purchased and then your investment. And then we take this kind of model and we copy and paste it to your next model, right? And it's amazing, the tax deduction that you build up, and then you're building up obviously the equity in your home with the more properties that you're owning. So it can be a very rewarding experience. I would highlight that if you're scared of being a landlord, I've got some great property managers that we can lean on for that. That still make a lot of sense as we're paying them per month and they're finding tenants for us. That can make sense. So when you're trying to cash flow a property, okay. So just to kind of recap everything, investing in real estate does have tremendous benefits. It's shown over time in all the dips and highs and lows of our market. I would say Vancouver is probably the most enduring. I always say, like, we've got mountains to the north, we got US to the south, we got water to the west, we got mountains to the east. So we're kind of sitting in a bit of a bubble. So leverage that bubble as much as you can, because the demand, I find, is always going to be here, and it seems to be. There's going to be slower times, but they always are always more outweighed by further time periods. Being a landlord isn't actually that tough, but if you find it difficult, it can be passed off to property manager. And then obviously investment property can lower your mortgage payments with proper cash flow if you've done it properly. So investment properties will increase your net worth exponentially over time. So I've had a lot of success of myself doing this in the past and my clients doing it. So I take a lot of pride in assisting people through that journey. And right now, I'm taking a lot of pride in saving them a lot of money on interest, getting them out of those higher rates that we had to go into over the last couple of years here. It's been really rewarding on that front, just trying to save money for clients. So if you're in that situation, please reach out on that front as well. So I think that's the end of my presentation there. I'm pretty sure, Brendan.
Awesome.
Jump into the Q&A.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So Kevin, thank you very much. Definitely opportunity in the real estate market. It is a market we have to be a little more careful. I think there was a period there from 2010 to 2020 where you just buy anything and you made money. We're not in that market now. I think whether you're an investor or just looking to own or occupy property, you should be doing your homework and being very, very careful who you do business with as well. Make sure the people you're transacting with have experience and have been in the market a while, because I find it's interesting. You see there's a ton of new realtors and mortgage people when the real estate market's really, really busy. And then in times like this, where it's the people who are actually always doing business are the ones who stick around. So I think experience is so important in this environment. So we've got a couple questions that have come in. So our first question that's come in is from an anonymous attendee, and they said there are always good deals on real estate. However, aside from finding a good deal, and you had, let's say you had $500,000 cash, what would you do to get the best rate of return over the next 3 years, looking at real estate?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would look at it was kind of, again, putting in offers, you want to get that deal. And I think looking at what it could service for debt too as well. So personally, like Kevin was talking about, and Steve too, like you just don't want to be in a negative cash flow situation. So working the numbers backwards from rental rates, what could this sustain? You want to be at least at a break even, and then kind of holding that down payment in that section there. And perhaps the rest of the cash, you could diversify yourself into potentially other equities or Brandon, and Brandon can probably speak to that more. But and potentially also, honestly, the next, maybe not right now, but I would keep watching the presale market. You'd look at things maybe next year if pre-sales have fallen off a roof, fallen from the roof the last couple of years, or last year anyway. But pre-sale I think will be great because there's going to be a hole in the marketplace very soon, since these products need 3 years to launch. So Rennie has really had low pre-sales. So what's going to happen is this hole in the market is going to start appearing very soon. And once we reopen immigration in 2 years, I think you probably want to be completing on a place at that time. So personally, I might start looking at pre-sale next year again, and then try to get some completing in 2028-ish, or later. Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I think 3 years, Ryan, it's such a short time horizon for real estate. So like, that's not really how I invest in real estate. Yeah, I just think trying to get in and out of real estate in 3 years is kind of, it's just risky. I don't know. I don't really play that game, to be honest. I mean, yeah, there's so many ways to cut it. It's like, are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for like appreciation? Obviously, I think like we're going to continue to develop, higher density. So like looking for, houses on main arterial roads, maybe some houses that are in these TOD areas, transit oriented development, where the BC government is basically required, massive upzoning to 20 plus story towers. I'd be looking in some of these markets for houses that are basically, not priced for that higher density. But again, are you going to get bought out by a developer in 3 years? Probably not. So yeah, 3 years is just too short of a time horizon, truthfully.
I'm assuming this person's asking for a long-term hold. They're not trying to make a quick buck in 3 years, but you're completely.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm looking for buy in the next 3 years, I don't know. I think there's a decent amount of foreclosures right now that I think are starting to get, they're starting to get interesting. I think there's foreclosures. I think you can definitely pick up some good buys. I think people also sometimes overpaying them because it's a blind bid, but I think there'll be some deals there.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I would say, like, if we're going 3 years, like if you have $500,000, you may want to look at situations where you're actually lending that money out as well in the right scenarios, because a lot of those components, like if I'm lending out a chunk of money on a private sort of situation, you then have the security of the home to back on with that investment. So if you're mortgaging out, if you're sending that money out for lending purposes, you've always got that fallback on the property if there's default. So plus you're making, depending on the scenario, if you're doing second mortgages, you're probably making 13% on the money. If you're doing first in a private scenario, you're probably making 9-10% on the money, plus lenders be on top of that. So if you're looking for a more short-term investment, I'd say look at more of the lending scope. So if you ever are interested in that, I can lead you on that. But the investment side on the property side is definitely more longer term, right? So you're looking for cash flow scenarios where it is either a wash or you are cash flowing on it. And I think, like Warren Buffett says, to be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. Well, we're kind of in that situation, is to try and be greedy when others are fearful right now. So this is where you're probably going to find some real estate opportunities. And like what Ryan said, is pre-sale, or Steve that said it with pre-sales. Right now, it probably is a better landing ground than buying a pre-sale 3 years ago, right? When people were greedy, right?
Yeah.
And now people are fearful. And, if you have the opportunity, that's probably where you want to move it, right?
Yeah, well, on the stock market side, like I've had some clients reach out this week and say, "Hey, should I move everything to cash?" And it's always usually the same people that ask me this question. And
Yeah.
it's usually when there's some bad news that comes out. So it's the same sort of thing. Like, but coming back to the original question, 3-year time horizon, there's so many transaction costs in real estate, so it's not the right move. If it's a 3-year investment, if it's just cash, you probably should be looking at sort of bonds or some sort of fixed income investment. You're not going to get some crazy return, but you're also not going to lose your shirt to transaction costs on buying and selling a piece of real estate. Longer term, I'd agree. Real estate's still a good place. Everyone needs a place to live. Immigration's not going to be closed forever. Rates are coming down. Like there will be better times ahead. Even though people say, it's the end, tariff war. There's always something, whether it's COVID, whether it's a great financial crisis. There's always something going wrong. Which that's why someone like Steve can put out a video once a week, and there's always something to talk about. But does that mean that we shouldn't do anything? We should just sit on our hands? Probably not. We should probably be having conversations like this. Where are the opportunities? Whether you're doing multifamily, whether you're investing in the stock market, you're buying your second or third real estate purchase. Next question we got. What would your considerations be with regards to investing in a vacation property?
If Airbnb's allowed.
Don't do it in BC.
I have something to say on that. I feel like if you were to buy a vacation property, like the window, I think I was talking to the guys about it earlier when we're chatting, but Whistler could be interesting right now. The interesting about Whistler is that it's one of the few markets that's open for foreign buyers. So with the devaluing of our currency in the Canadian dollar, you might start seeing some Americans looking to go shopping up in Whistler. And also they're not hit with the heavy transfer taxes up there too. So I wouldn't be surprised if Whistler starts picking up sooner than the rest of the market. It's kind of its own bubble. So if I were looking at vacation properties personally, why not get a place in Whistler and go ski and make a buck at it? So I think Whistler could do quite well actually. But again, vacation properties are subject to, if recessions occur, like those are the first things that people stop buying. So I would approach it with caution, but if you're looking to buy anyways, like Whistler could be very good actually.
Yeah, I think there's some pockets in we actually have an arm of our business where we have opportunities for clients that want to invest in the US as well. So if you're looking for kind of like a vacation rental property that you can utilize down in the US, I know a lot of people probably don't want to travel to the US right now with all that's going on, but I do have a function to get investments. You need about 35% down for that investment. If I have clients looking for investment opportunities in the US, so
We're not promoting buying in the US right now, Kevin. We're trying to support.
right, that's the thing, right? So, but at the end of the day, you always want to make money, right? So,
Uh,
yeah,
if there's a time to be patriotic, it's now.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but what's the entry level in Whistler, Ryan? Isn't it pretty pricey just to get in up there?
Yeah, so if you're not buying leasehold and you want to buy in something that you don't, because Love Whistler is subject to 40 days per year that you can use it yourself. So if you want like an open like kind of arrangement, you're probably looking at 750,000 for like a 1-bedroom starting price in Creekside, where you can Airbnb it, you can rent it long term, you can move in there yourself. It's kind of open. That's kind of what you're looking at for non-leasehold. But there are leasehold options as well. But I'd say recommend probably starting at that price to get something decent, 700K. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. We got a question for, I guess, someone who's a little newer. They're saying, if I was just coming out of university with some money in savings, where would you put it if your goal is to have a piece of real estate in a few years? And then are there specific markets you'd look at? So I'll speak from the financial planning lens and then ask you guys on the real estate side. But yeah, the FHSA is helpful if you have an income. So if your income is less than like 30,000 a year, don't bother putting it in the FHSA because you won't really get much tax savings. But once you're at that 50, 60, 70, 80K mark, the tax deduction of the FHSA would be worth putting money in. So say tax-free savings account, great place to start until you have a higher income, then FHSA. And then of course you can use the RSP as well to tack on with the FHSA. So now it's up to 60,000 you can withdraw from the RSP, which is kind of crazy. But so if you were buddy up, so you got a spouse, 60,000 per RSP plus the FHSA, 40,000 a piece. Now you've got a pretty large down payment threshold there, and getting some tax deductions along the way. But then in terms of market to purchase a entry level property for somebody new, How's the condo market?
I mean, I don't think the condo market's very strong right now, personally. I mean, obviously we chatted about it. I mean, that's where some good deals are. I think particularly like downtown Vancouver, it's been a flat to down market for the last 7 years, and so there's definitely some deals there. I mean, obviously, as the investors move to the sidelines, that's in a heavy investor market. So, yeah, I think if you're looking for deals, that's a good market. I think other areas like out in the valley, like Surrey, where they're building a ton of product, and there was a ton of speculation, and obviously rates have gone up. I think there's a lot of inventory, where you could probably pick up some deals there too.
Might be a good idea just to keep saving up a little bit out of university. Find some work, save, and invest in something where you can, build that slowly, but keep your pulse on the market over the next year and a half. And yeah, I don't think I wouldn't recommend rushing into the market right now. But definitely want to keep your tabs on it. And yeah, like Steve said, just downtown Vancouver is like, yeah, and there's a few markets that you could probably get some interesting deals down the road.
Do your research, right? If you get into a build that is shoddy, then you got to deal with high premiums for insurance. You got to deal with floods. I've had some clients deal with floods recently, and it can be a real pain in the butt. So, making sure you got good stratas. Yeah, owning real estate can be fantastic, but it can be a massive pain in the butt. So renting isn't actually negative. People say, oh, renting sucks. It's like in BC, actually renting is really good. Like the government has your back if you're a renter. They do not have your back if you're a landlord. So, there's times to rent, and if you're staying at home for a little while longer. My wife stayed at home till she went to law school. She was like 26, 27. And she saved a ton of money, a ton of money. Meanwhile, I was paying rent all that way along, and it took me a little bit longer to get into real estate. So, yeah, never feel like you should have to rush. Good point. Next question here is, over the next few years, what are the positive or optimistic cases for buying real estate? We've talked a lot about sort of the negatives, but what are some things that may change that could benefit real estate, particularly in Greater Vancouver?
Lower interest rates. Right?
Mhm.
So right now you've got, I keep on going back to that fear thing. So buying real estate when others are in fear might get you a deal. And as rates continue to come down, I feel like we have a bunch of people that are sitting on the fence trying to let the dust settle a little bit. And then as confidence grows, they all jump in the same pool at the same time and things overflow. And I've seen this happen like over different periods of time in my 17 years doing this over and over again. And just as soon as there's a bunch of people sitting on the fence trying to wait to see things happen, and everybody jumps in, then that gets us into those markets where we're multiple offers and trying to go in subject free, and as rates come down, confidence will grow up, right? So it's interesting times for sure, but I would see an opportunity right now buying real estate that 2-3 years from now might increase in value as confidence grows, right? It's all confidence.
I'm gonna stick back because I think the 3-year horizon, I don't know why this number keeps getting thrown out, but it's just like when we look at the peak of the market in March 2022 to now, we've already gone through 3 years of this kind of sideways / down market. It could, continue the way it is, this trend for now. But if we add another 3 years, that's a 6-year mark. I mean, that's a pretty long time to have flat or down prices. I feel like we should start to be out of the woodworks by 3 years from now. If not, there's probably a lot bigger problem we have. But yeah, I think we'll see. Like the probably new president come in soon after 3 years is up. So we'll see what happens down there. Things stabilize. I feel like that 3 to 4 year window is probably quite a reasonable window to have. And if you have a long-term horizon, then above that, then I feel like that's kind of what you want.
Steve, the perma bear, any
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just still a major global metro city that obviously is going to continue to grow and to densify. And as your new supply gets turned off here over the next 24 months, because nobody's launching new product, that you'll create your shortfall. I don't think your shortfall's in 2 years, but if you don't launch today, you create your supply shortage probably 5-6 years out. So yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable. So that's what I'd say.
Are we going to see more developers going under? And if so, in what markets do you think we'll see that?
I mean, it's smaller to the small, medium-sized guys, right? That if you can't launch a project, if you can't hit your pre-sale targets, like you don't really have the ability to sort of like just sort of sit and wait. So you kind of have to push through, right? Because you're typically sitting on like high interest rate loans. You typically have limited partners on the investor side. So obviously, if you sit there and delay a project 3-4 years, it grinds down their returns, right? So typically speaking, it's the less small to medium sized guys that have to push through in any part of the cycle, and so I think those are the ones that are going to be. Yeah, I mean, it's a long drawn out process. There's definitely more that will probably, not probably. There's more that will go under for sure.
Is it a good time to buy a townhouse as a first time buyer in Abbotsford, or wait until the spring market or later for potentially a better deal?
The nice thing about townhouses is if you need to, you can always rent out some rooms. That's why I like to say townhouses or duplexes. You have a bit of a backup with cash flow. So I mean, I would say townhouses are probably good. The demand for townhouses will probably hold quite steady because again, like the baby boomers' children, the millennials, we are all buying places now, and most of them are looking for townhouses. And townhouses, just for how much space they take up, they take up a ton of space. So there's not enough being built, I would say, for people that need them. So for now or next year, I don't think townhouses will be the worst kind of product type to get into. And you do have a backup if you have a nice floor plan that you can rent out the first floor with its own bathroom. That's nice too. You can have a bit of a private living situation there with someone that wants to rent as a roommate. You have a backup. So I think if you're okay with that, then and you can find a good deal, then you have a backup there. So I wouldn't wait if you saw a good deal. Go for it.
Kevin, Ryan, Steve, thank you guys very much for sharing your time and expertise. I'm fortunate to have some of the best in the business here to kind of support my clients and ensure everyone gets quality information throughout the year. So here's all our social medias. If you're not following any of us, please do add us. The goal is to educate and provide support so you can make smart decisions. And so at the end of the day, everyone knows I'm a financial planner. We're not salespeople. And that's the approach I want to take with anyone that I introduce to clients, to ensure that you can make the best decision now and be confident about that decision years down the road. It's never want to get over leveraged. You never want to take on too much real estate, too many investments in the stock market. But you do need to make sure you take risk when others are fearful, as Kevin's mentioned a couple times. So any final words, gentlemen, before we wrap up for today?
No, I think the tone of the session was good. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with how tariffs are going to play out. So, sitting and watching that over the next few weeks here as we ease into April, what was it, April 2nd, that I think the full launch is going with these tariffs, is probably a smart move. You could probably definitely grab a deal right now for somebody who's selling that really needs to sell. You might find a deal there. But if you want to kind of get rid of that uncertainty, I would say probably give it a month before you jump in and purchase something just for that added certainty. But just knowing that in that waiting period, if more people get confidence, then you got more people jumping in at the same time, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I mean, I think that you have the most leverage as a buyer to negotiate when the sentiment is at the lows, and so yeah, I think a lot of people tend to wait till they sort of see like the home price index bottoming and starting to move higher. But by that time, everybody kind of knows the market's recovering and sentiment's already shifted. So, I mean, yeah, you get the most leverage on a negotiation when people are depressed and think it's only going to get worse.
I don't know where I heard. I heard the term. It's not FOMO, right? Not FOMO right now. It's FOMO, fear of messing up. So that's kind of where you want to be more careful, is just to not get yourself in a bad deal. And you just want to be selective, like all these smart guys are saying. Like there's pockets of where you want to be and where you don't want to be. Especially right now, you got to really pick those pockets out, and not just blindly buy. So yeah.